All right, everybody, welcome back. Here we go. Round 4, Sealed Deck, GP Minneapolis. Carlos Romao on your left, Matt Nass on your right. These players coming off their buys and getting ready to play. And here we go. Carlos Romao leading it off with the tap land.
Yeah, and both players actually have a blue-white strategy. Matt's is really heavy on the artifact synergies, and he's also got pretty decent power level with things like Herald of Faith. Carlos, with also kind of a white-blue deck, he's got the Aviation Pioneers and some artifacts of his own. So both players kind of playing that blue-white tempo-style strategy, but with reasonably strong late games as well.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a little bit. These artifact synergies in this color combination can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, the Scholar of Stars is kind of emblematic of that, right? 4 mana 3/2, something you never want to include in your limited deck if you can avoid it. But you throw the draw card clause onto that, and all of a sudden you've got an extremely powerful 4-drop creature. Really good rate on that. So. What you want to do with these sorts of decks is play the kind of artifacts you see in play,
right.
Incidental Thopter, Sky Scanner, so that you get artifacts out without sacrificing too much.
Yeah, and there you go. Matt Nass, he did not take the trade with those Sky Scanners, and you see why as he follows it up right there. So now with those, he's got a 4/4 flyer alongside the Sky Scanner, and that does trump Carlos's board as he picks it up to read it.
Yeah, Aerial Engineer, one of those kind of border post uncommons that people play in the format, and wow.
Yeah, it makes that lack of block there for Matt Nass make a lot of sense. But it looks like a Hieromancer's Cage is going to come down and take it off the board here.
Yeah, and you notice Matt Nass reading Hieromancer's Cage. I mentioned earlier about some of the pros. Maybe not as familiar with Core Set 2019 Limited as they would normally be going into a limited Grand Prix of this nature. So, wouldn't surprise me if we see some upsets in terms of less experienced players knocking off some of the pros.
Right. Well, that was a huge turn there for Carlos. Matt Nass was looking pretty good. He had that Sky Scanner. He had a 4/4 flyer, and by the end of that, he had taken some damage and now has to completely start over with his board. But going back to Scholar of Stars as being emblematic of what we want to see in these archetypes is Take Vengeance gets Matt Nass back in the game there a little bit in terms of the board state. But a lot of these artifact synergies, you tackle, draw, you tap to draw a card with the Scholar, you tack that onto the card, and all of a sudden it's kind of a free card, right? It replaces itself. Now it's a 3/2 body that cantripped.
Right. I mean, so much of limited Magic comes down to rate. And when I say rate, I mean how much are you getting in return on investment for the amount of mana that you put in.
Right.
And what synergies do is they break the normal rules of the rate that you're supposed to get on a Magic card. We see it all the time in Draft. When you're able to create those synergies in Sealed Deck, that's even more powerful because it's not guaranteed that when you just open up 6 booster packs, those synergies are going to be readily apparent.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of rate, how's a 5-mana 2/2 there with Salvager of Secrets? Yeah,
so the Scrivener, right? The classic type of card here that returns an instant or a sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. Use it to get back a Take Vengeance. Totally reasonable card if you have enough of that Take Vengeance type action in your deck.
And it's a Merfolk, so it's just obviously the best 5-drop in the set. Anyway, so taking stock of this board here, though, Matt Nass, he is getting some value with that Salvager and so on. He's got Take Vengeance in his hand, but he has fallen to 11 from the attacks from Carlos here, who just added another pretty good attacker there with that Windreaver Sphinx. Oh, wow. Well, make that Matt Nass's Windreaver Sphinx right there. That is the old switcheroo, giving him the 5-mana 2/2 in exchange for the bomb flyer.
Yeah, and switcheroo is the kind of card that you're going to see. The better the player is, the better we're able to operate a card like this, right? We saw some players last week who were less experienced casting switcheroo for very minor upgrades in their creatures, turning a 2/2 into a 4/4, for example. What you want to do is exactly what Matt did: play a creature with an Enter the Battlefield ability. It's done its job, and now you turn it into the bomb rare from your opponent. So nice play, Matt Nass.
Yeah, this game has been actually pretty entertaining so far with some big swings, and that switcheroo right there is huge because not just it doesn't just give Matt that big creature, but you know what? That's a card draw engine in itself now that he has it in play.
Yeah, and importantly, you notice the creature that he gave over to Carlos is the Salvager of Secrets. So if Matt's able to find something like a Disperse or a Exclusion Mage, he could get back his own Salvager of Secrets and then use it again to switcheroo something else or reuse Take Vengeance against any number of things.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of long-term value. Carlos going to try to keep him from getting there as he swings in. That is a pretty large artifact creature right there with the Marauder's Axe on him. Was Matt going to go for the block with the Mare. Just happy to throw it away here.
Right, and Matt wants to protect his life total. He has the Take Vengeance in his hand. He's got a way to draw cards on the battlefield in the form of Carlos's Wind Reader Sphinx. So he correctly identifies that he doesn't want to take a big chunk of damage, and Surge Mare is going to have limited impact as the game goes along. So he's going to be careful.
Yeah, that Gearsmith Guardian is pretty big. It's a 5/5 right now, thanks to having a blue creature there for Carlos, but a 7/5 on that attack. So that was actually represented a large chunk of Matt's life total. So, all right, here we go. So he's got a lot of value with this Sphinx in play to draw some cards, but facing down a lot of pressure as well.
Yeah, 2 Sphinxes, Sphinges, right?
Yeah.
What's the
Sphinxi? Not sure.
So yeah. Sphinges.
Oh, okay. All right.
We're hearing.
Mirror image to copy it up. So mirror image enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature you control. So that was a 3-mana Sphinx right there. And it's a lot of cards in Matt Nass's hand. So Carlos, if you're sitting in his seat here, do you see Matt just kind of getting to do everything he wants? How do you close the game out from this point?
Yeah, really tough with Matt at 11, and I think we see what a nice block that was by Matt with the Surge Mare, right? If Matt's sitting there at 4, well, now there's some hopes that Carlos could do something like cast Sleep or combine some removal spells or bounce spells to be able to sneak through this last 4 damage. 11 is a pretty daunting task, especially given that with Matt's card draw engines on the table, he's going to be able to continue to develop his board, build up defenses, and find answers for additional threats that Carlos might deploy.
Yeah, and here we go. 11 life. Swing for damage, draw 2 cards. Not so bad. Another Salvager of Secrets. Wow. Switcheroo coming back to the hand. Matt Nash just having his way. And here we have the wall coming down. We talked about earlier how it doesn't always seem to work out, but when you're playing switcheroos, that's soak up some damage, give them a wall while you take their best creature. Could be pretty good.
Yeah, Matt's deck is an obvious wall of this deck, right? Evasion, really high power level in the mid to late game, and obviously ways to give it to your opponent.
And just absolutely took it down there as you saw that. Putting switcheroo back in the hand, that was enough for Carlos. So that was pretty good as Matt takes game 1 there. All right, so I believe we're going to come back to the booth here. And no, we are not coming back to the booth. Sorry about that. So, all right, into the sideboarding here. So we're going to take some fact or fiction in between games. You ready? All right, fact or fiction. Copying things you can only ever stop you being behind. It never gets you ahead.
Well, that's fiction. I mean, certainly there are situations where metamorphic alteration can exacerbate existing situations, or if the board is close and your opponent has one threat, but you're ahead in every other situation, and you copy that threat. I mean, there's a bunch. It's a kind of a tricky question, but I would say that's fiction.
Well, I would certainly say in that game we just saw, copying things worked out pretty well for Matt Nash.
Yeah.
Takes you from having one removal spell to even up the board to now I have 2 of the best card.
Right, and we saw there that we talked about Rate earlier, and that was a great example of it. He used Mirror Image to make a 7, the equivalent of a 7-mana creature. I mean, that's an incredible amount of mana advantage. So, when you get up significant amounts of mana like that, that's one of the many ways that you can gain advantages in a game of limited Magic.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so believe we have a second fact or fiction queued up here. All right, fact or fiction. Someone will play this in Sealed this weekend. That someone will not have read Omniscience. Omniscience, of course, being a 10-mana enchantment. It is quite powerful. You may cast spells from your hand without paying their mana costs, but how likely are you to have spells to cast after you get to 10 mana?
So I think that's fiction. I do think someone will play it, but I also think they will have read it. I don't think that we're going to see it on camera necessarily, but one of the beautiful things about the Grand Prix is when they're so large is that there are so many different permutations and combinations of players and card pools. You're going to see almost every type of strategy, every type of sealed deck. You're going to see some of the best and worst pools maybe that you've ever seen if you've never come to a tournament of this size. You certainly will see at least a couple people trying to do things with Omniscience and maybe Sift and Salvager of Secrets and funky stuff like that. I wouldn't advise it. I definitely would do the reading part. I wouldn't do the playing part.
Reading your cards good. Playing 10-mana cards and sealed that don't impact the board, maybe not so good.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Is there ever a reason to play Omniscience in Limited?
Yeah. Oh, in Limited. Man, I could see it in Cube.
In Cube. All right. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right. Well, I believe here we go. Back down to the feature match area. Carlos Ramel down a game to Matt Nass. Matt Nass, of course, has been tearing up the Grand Prix circuit. You alluded to it earlier with Clark Clan Ironworks in Modern, but also we saw he's got some limited chops as well, as he just absolutely ran a clinic on how to switcheroo that last game. Card advantage the entire way, just had everything he wanted, and finds himself one game away from taking down Carlos Romao here in round 4. All right, here we go. So, round 4, GP Minneapolis. Matt Nass, Carlos Romao off to a quick start here. As there's a rare. That's a Remorseful Cleric for Carlos Romao. 2-mana flyer, can sacrifice itself to exile a graveyard, which actually kind of relevant given those Savager secrets.
Yeah, you're always happy to play a 2-mana 2/1 flyer. That the ability is kind of tacked on for mostly constructed, but here, right. Yeah, given Matt's exact deck list, pretty nice insurance against potentially getting back something like Switcheroo. Yeah,
and Carlos Romao adds the Aviation Pioneer, so that's a lot of power right there, and Matt missing his 3rd land drop. That's not what he wants to see as he faces down 4 power flyers.
Oh. Yeah, and Matt, one of the few players that would like to use the cleanup step during a game he's winning, certainly not happy to use it in a game that he's losing this badly.
Yeah, and he just flings down that wall knowing that it's just going to get tapped by the stag there. So Carlos Romao might be off to a pretty quick one, and there you go. The Angel arrives, +1/+1, and Vigilance to the team. Tap down your wall, get in for a bunch of damage. This might be a quick one. Yeah, there you go. Matt Nass gets 2 lands in play, and just like that, we are into a game 3. All right, well, that's an example of what happens when your late game deck is not able to set up.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing that occasionally happens in limited Magic.
Yeah.
Obviously, Matt probably had a hand that had an island and a plains, and he was on the draw, so he figured with 3 shots at hitting his his 3rd land drop, it was worth taking a risk, and didn't work out. It's one of those things that happens roughly 20% of the time when you're on the draw there.
It's part of weathering a tournament. I mean, on that note, though, that's obviously super frustrating. Like, if you're Matt Nass, you play game 1, everything's going well for you, your deck's firing on all cylinders, feels great. Then you have a complete dud. You don't even get to play. How do you mentally sort of weather that storm? Obviously, you've had all kinds of tournament Magic success yourself. How, when something like that happens to you and it's really frustrating, how do you kind of move to sideboarding, move to game 3, and be ready to go again?
Well, I'd say a few things. First of all, that's why we play 3 games, right?
Right.
Magic is a game that the mana system is one of the most beautiful things ever designed for games, but it does occasionally lead to things like that. That's why we play 3 games. It's designed to kind of mitigate to a small degree some of the variance that occurs with land draws. I'll say that with players that are this seasoned, in this professional, they've seen it all before. So, that's not going to affect Matt Nass. He's not going to take any frustration into the 3rd game or anything of that nature. I'd say from my own personal perspective, for me in Magic, I've only ever worried about the things that I can control. So if you've ever seen me upset at a tournament, I guarantee you it's because of something I've done and not because my deck didn't give me a land or my opponent made some brilliant play. It's usually when I've made an error. And certainly, Matt with a defensible decision to keep a 2-land hand on the draw it just didn't work out. He'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's one of those things, and this is why we have the Pro Show, right? We get these people on, people get to see. You mentioned you can't get mad at things you can't control, and that is something that a lot of players, whether if you go to your first event or your first Grand Prix or something, you have something like that happen, you just have to, be like Matt Nass and just move on to game 3 here, make the best decisions you can make with the stuff you can control.
Sure, and it happens in everything, right? You can make a great project at work and your boss is in a bad mood. You can hit a smoked line drive and it goes right to a fielder. It happens in everything. So there's no reason to let it bother you.
Yeah, and not going to plan either here is Carlos Romao's opening hand as he takes the mulligan down. Looks like Matt is going to keep. He will be back on the play for this game as we have a deciding game 3. We've had 2 fairly quick games here. Plenty of time left in the round for both players. So what do you think we're going to see here in this 3rd game? Matt being on the play, certainly easier to get to that late game, but we saw that Carlos could put together some pretty nice starts, the way he curved 2, 3, 4, 5 on that last one.
Yeah, Matt appears to be, to me, better equipped for the late game with things like Switcheroo and the 2 copies of Salvager of Secrets. So, Carlos is going to want to be on the aggressor. He's got 2 of the Star Crown Stag, 2 copies of Angel of the Dawn, 2 copies of Aviation Pioneer. So he wants to get on the board quickly, get a nice curve, go wide, and beat Matt Nass before his more powerful late game really starts to take effect.
Yeah, and also looking at the deck list here, there's a lot of removal for Carlos couple Luminous Bonds, a Hieromancer's Cage. You can deal with some of those bigger cards for Matt. Obviously, you don't want to switcheroo, get rid of the cards you had to switcheroo away, but it is an option available to Carlos. He doesn't necessarily just going to die to those big ones. And all right, looks like he's going to keep 6 here. Ships a card to the bottom on the scry. Island for Matt, Plains for Carlos Ramau, and now we'll see second island for Matt Nass. And all right, first play of the game, Remorseful Cleric again here for Carlos Ramau. 2 mana, 2/1 flyer. That gets in damage throughout the course of the entire game. Oh, here we go. That is a pretty bomby equipment landing from Matt Nass. So as the game goes on here, Sigiled Sword of Valor, and 3 mana to play it. Sure, that's expensive, and 3 mana to equip it. But the payoff when you do get a tap is huge. Creature gets +2/+0. It has Vigilance. It's a knight. And when it attacks, you get a 2/2 white knight token with Vigilance that's attacking. And he follows it up with a 4 mana flyer, although that's not going to last for long. So Luminous Bonds takes down the Aerial Engineer, and the Merciful Cleric gets in. So talk about how much you like this equipment here, especially in Sealed.
Yeah, that's the kind of equipment that even Owen Turtenwald would probably play. So
right. Pass the Owen test.
Right. I think that you have to basically it's a risk reward thing. That's a pretty big investment. 3 mana plus an additional 3 mana to equip. It does open you up to things like instant speed, removal, or bounce. But the reward is sort of a cascading advantage, right? You start to build more and more knights, and then things can kind of snowball and get out of control. So certainly a high power level card, and one of those cards that specifically shines in Sealed deck by turning those kind of random creatures you're forced to play to fill your curve in the early game into massive threats in the mid game.
Yeah, it lasts throughout the entire game, and it not exactly the first thing you want to play. You'd rather play it later when you have something to equip it to. So we'll see what Matt does here. Aviation Pioneer's on the stack, and it's going to go ahead and get canceled by Matt, and the Remorseful Cleric gets in. So essentially trading the Pioneer there for the cancel, which acted as a removal spell. And now Matt is just, again, going to pass the turn with 6 mana open.
Yeah, we saw Matt, interestingly, pump fake on his turn 5, potentially a switcheroo. I think he was considering giving his Luminous Bonded Aerial Engineer to Carlos, realized that Carlos could sacrifice Remorseful Cleric in response, and Matt would not end up with a creature. So I wonder, obviously, Matt wants to wait for something better to take than nothing. Yeah,
how about a stag here? You think that's worth giving away a Luminous Bonded creature?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Star Crown Stag, one of the best commons in Core Set 2019, and interesting decision by Carlos to not attack with Remorseful Cleric, perhaps fearing something like Invoke the Divine from Carlos or from Matt.
Absolutely, and there we do see the switcheroo picking up the Stag. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That was a good call, because if he had, say a Disperse even or an Invoke the Divine to remove that Luminous Bonds from the Aerial Engineer, then of course it would get a free block on the Remorseful Cleric. So Carlos Ramau saying one step ahead of the possibilities here. This time though, now that you're the one stuck with the creature that can't do anything, feel free to get on in there.
Yeah, and this looks pretty good for Matt, right? He's going to get to untap and know that he's able to equip the Sigiled Sword of Valor to the Stag and not with no risk.
Wow, and he's even got more, adding another flyer to the board. Now gets to attack, tap down the Gearsmith. Herald of Faith is that flyer. 5 mana, 4/3 flyer. You gain 2 life whenever you attack. It's pretty good for those those black-white life gain decks, but also just perfectly fine in a blue-white flyers deck as well. But now that if Matt gets in there, he gets the knight. That is a lot of value generated off that one attack.
Tapped Vigilance. Okay, there we go. Yeah. So major advantage Matt Nass. He has the advantage bar here, but he is down to 12, right? So the difference here is that Carlos has more of a board. Matt doesn't really have the full shields up in terms of bad things happening to him. So if Carlos could somehow get that Herald of Faith off the board, Carlos does still have profitable attacks with Remorseful Cleric. So Carlos has some interplay depending on what he has in his hand.
Yeah, and it looks like he at least has cards in his hand that aren't all land. So we'll see what he opts to try to get back in this here. So yeah, now that the sword is hit, the knights have started coming down. It seems like getting in through the air is going to be his best course of action to try to steal this game. All right, he follows up here with the Scholar of Stars. Going to draw a card off of it. That's we'll see if that's step 1. Thinking it through, looks like he if you got to assume if he had an answer, he would have slammed it down on that Stag. or that equipment. So
yeah, and on first glance, right, you think, okay, well, it's another 3-power creature that could potentially trade off for the stag.
right.
But of course, Matt has the ability to just move the Sigiled Sword of Valoron right over to the flyer and send in with that kind of with impunity here. So Carlos is looking at a pretty uncomfortable attack step from Matt Nass coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, he can, he can take the knight that's coming in off of the equipment, but that's not where you want to be. He does, he could choose to block that knight with the Gear Hulk or the Scholar Souls. Instead, gets aggressive with it, sends it in. That makes sense. It's attacks for 5. Follows up with a Chaplain here to.
Yeah, and Daybreak Chaplain's a card I'm going to admit I'm a little surprised to see in Carlos's post-sideboard configuration for this white-blue mirror match. Traditionally, you don't have much of a need to stop, for example, 2/1 ground creatures in white-blue mirrors. It's better against, for example, a red-white deck that might play a lot of things like Viashino Pyromancer. So, little surprised, Carlos may have just felt like he didn't have anything better.
Yeah, and he's certainly in a rough spot here. Again, tapped out against bomb equipment. Not where you want to be. So, if you're Matt, and you look at this board state, is one of the things that goes through your mind here, it seems like he's very far ahead. What are the considerations when you feel like you've got a game locked up, but, you're not quite there? What do you want to really take into account in this moment to make sure that you're able to close it out?
Well, I mean, 1, don't die, right? You're at 7, right? You're going to gain a couple life from the trigger here coming up, but there are certainly plenty of ways that Carlos could at least represent 9 points of damage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wow.
Okay, so here we go. He keeps the equipment on the stag, attacks, taps down the Scholar of Stars. So Carlos Romero has access to 3 power to block if he wants. He is still, however, there's 2 knights attacking plus a 4/3 flyer, so a lot of pressure right here.
Yeah, and by Carlos attacking with the Guardian, it meant that Matt can just leave the Sigiled Sword of Valoron on the stag and still have a profitable attack here, as opposed to having to move it. So now Carlos doesn't really have a comfortable block. He could double block the stag. That's an option. But really, any of his blocks are pretty uncomfortable. He's going to take a huge chunk of damage, and Matt going up to a slightly safer 9. Although, again, there's ways to present 9 points of damage with things like Inspired Charge.
Right. Well, and you also mentioned Sleep earlier with tap down all creatures. That one buys you a lot of time.
Right.
All right, so Carlos thinking through his blocks right here. And the real problem with the sword getting going is that even if you take away the creature it's on, well, now they've got these extra knights that have arrived. So a lot going through Carlos's mind on this block here. We'll see what he ultimately opts to go with to try to get back in it.
And Herald of Faith, I think, is really shining in this particular game, right? The size of the creature is pretty generous, but the triggered ability giving Matt 2 life, I mean, the marginal value of those 2 life when you're at 7 in a race situation is just so high, right? And it's like you feel so much more comfortable at 9 that you're not going to just randomly die to a combination of things. So, and obviously, it's just the kind of card that it's an advantage that continues to build the longer it stays in the battlefield.
Yeah, it looks like Carlos opted to just... Oh, wow, is that Psy? The Thopterus has arrived. So it looks like Carlos opted to take a huge chunk there, maybe thinking what you were. He needs to keep his creatures around to try to find a way to get back in it. But Matt Nass adding to the board right there. So this is going to be pretty tough here. We'll see if he drew anything that helps.
Yeah, and it looks like a real tough situation here for Carlos. His creatures are just not matching up really well against what Matt has. Again, in this case, it's Carlos's stag, but we see the Star Crown stag just looking so brutal as Carlos doesn't have any blocks.
There you go, Marauder's Axe. Not enough. He extends the hand. Matt Nass taking it down 2-1 over Carlos Romero. We saw a lot of nice cards there from Matt. He's got the most value off of switcheroo I've seen yet in this set.
Yeah, his deck looks good. I mean, like I said, he has enough early game to be able to survive, and then obviously his late game is extremely powerful. He's got the kind of the rares and the uncommons that you're hoping to have in order to give you a chance against the wide array of sealed decks that you might face. So we saw in the 2 games where Matt drew lands and spells, his deck looked very, very impressive.
Yeah, well, welcome back to the booth, everybody. I'm Corbin Haas. I'm joined by Paul Rietzel. We just watched Matt Nass take down Carlos Romero in the first of our feature matches. We will be back with some more here. Autumn Burchett, Raf Levy, Makis, Matsukis, Sam Pardee. We've got a lot of great players in this feature match area, and we will have some of that for you coming up right after this. Minneapolis. I'm Corbin Hostler. I'm with Paul Reitzel, and we just saw Matt Nass take down Carlos Romao in the first match. Three games, two of which were pretty good, I suppose. And now we are headed down. We've got a couple more great players here. So we've got Autumn Burchett and Raph Levy. Raph Levy, of course, a member of the Magic Pro Tour Hall of Fame. So it's he's got quite the resume, and Autumn is the English national champion. So here we go. We're jumping right into the time walk. Raph Levy on your right, Autumn Burchett on your left. Looks like we've got, wow, the Drill Master with no value on turn 2. So talk about that play. You know, when you have cards that haven't entered the battlefield ability that you want, but I mean, you know, as we see Raph here, maybe sometimes it's correct not to take it.
Well, Raph has a green, one of these green-white aggressive decks that we've seen a little bit of. Doesn't really have a lot of the aura synergies, using more of the tricks to push through in the mid to late game. So Raph really wants to be the aggressor with his deck in general,
right,
but also specifically in this matchup. Autumn has a very kind of ambitious 4-color deck, green, black, splash, chromium. So
that's a pretty good one.
So in this situation, Raph clearly wants to be the aggressor.
Yeah, and Autumn, of course, with 3 colors of mana already as they add Sky Scanner to the board. And Raph, forced to just pass back, doesn't attack, doesn't have green mana, not exactly where you want to be, staring down 3 separate colors of mana from your opponent on turn 3.
Yeah, and one of the big edge for Raph, right, is being the aggressor, is kind of curving out, and he's already kind of given up that advantage here. Autumn has the advantage of having, in theory, a stronger late game by dipping into so many colors. So they're going to be able to weather the storm from Raph, and now they have the ability to get into the late game, which is where their decks should really shine.
Yeah, and now Autumn adds that Bloodletter to the board, so it drains. It's pretty good for that, but also 3 power in the air, just serving with the Bloodletter, though, leaving back the Sky Scanner to represent a block at least. So, all right, well, look at this, and a defensive combat trick from Raph.
Yeah, an ambitious Mighty Leap and probably a sigh of relief for Raph, as he certainly opened himself up to any number of possible 2-for-1s there. And, but Raph kind of in desperation mode already, right? Can't fall any further behind.
Yeah, it's got to find some green mana here. As Epicure of Blood added to Autumn's side. Talk about this card. I mean, it's a 5-mana 4/4. We've talked a lot about raid. It also has an ability, though, that, you know, whenever you gain life, and we've seen these white-black decks with plenty of life gain.
Yeah, it's a role player. I think that it's I think it's not that strong of a card. The fact that it dies to something like Electrify, where you end up being down a mana.
Yeah.
4/4 is just a pretty poor sizing for a 5-mana creature. Obviously, if you trigger it a few times, it can be pretty good. Obviously, in combination with things like Vampire Neonate, it starts to look very impressive.
Right.
Not a card you're embarrassed to put in your deck, but certainly not a power common.
Yeah, it can occasionally, in those white-black decks really go off, since every time you gain a life, each opponent loses a life. So multiple instances of life gain in one turn will trigger it multiple times, which is pretty good. But in this case, it also looks all right as just a 4/4 attacker. Oh, wow. All right, Raph willingly 2-for-1ing himself there with the Mighty Leap. What does that say about where we're at in this game?
Yeah, again, he's just behind, and these are really tough situations for aggressive decks to be in. He somehow needs to find green mana and then be able to start deploying the cards in his hand, and then hope that Autumn really just does not draw any of the good cards in their deck. Oh,
wow, and look at that. Just an insta-draw go there from Raph Levy. Not the kind of draw go you want there. I guess, the only plus side I see here at all of this is that after all of this, 2-for-1 himself, playing defensively, not having colors of mana, still at least 15 life here. All right, let's see. Autumn has. Oh wow, that's a pretty good one right there. Blood Divination as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature. That's a high price to pay, but you know what? Drawing 3 cards is a pretty good payoff.
Yeah, in black-green based decks, we haven't really seen kind of come together as a coherent strategy, but Blood Divination is one of the absolute strongest cards for that archetype. You have so many cards, like Reassembling Skeleton and Doomed Dissenter that just are sitting on the battlefield. You're happy to sacrifice them, and 4-mana draw 3 cards is so powerful in a game of sealed deck.
Yeah, and on top of that, we see a green uncommon. I've seen people splashing for Dryad Greenseeker. 2-mana 1/3. Again, not a bad rate itself, but the real power is in its ability. Look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, put it into your hand. That draws you extra cards over the course of the game, and with those cards, you can probably pump up that Vine Mare that's joined the team.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things about Giant Greenseeker that I've harped on a little bit is your options when to use it, right? So you always want to use it if you can use it free, so on your opponent's end step. There are often good times to use it on your upkeep. For example, in this situation where you've got plenty of lands out, you really don't want to draw a land card for your turn, so what you can do is kind of use it on their end step, assuming it hits a land. Use it again on your upkeep. That means that you have another shot at potentially getting through a land to make sure that you're maximizing the chances of finding a spell.
Yeah, and in this case, there's not even a need to activate it as Thornhide Wolves joins the battlefield and just ends that one in a hurry. Raph was not able to get going at all in that game. We'll see if he's able to do any better here in Game 2. He gets to be on the play.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know it from looking at that game, but Raph's deck is actually mostly green. He has nine forests and mostly green cards in his deck. So obviously, with just 4 planes, wasn't really able to advance any kind of game plan.
Look at Autumn's mana base working perfectly in both games here. Green, white, black on turn 2. Not bad for them. And here we go. I believe this is Izareth hitting the battlefield. Izareth the Awakener. This is a pretty powerful rare out of the set. So it is a 3-mana 3/3. Again, not a bad rate on its own, but it also has Death Touch. And whenever it attacks, you may pay X. When you do, return target creature with converted mana cost X from your graveyard to the battlefield with a corpse counter on it. If that creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it anywhere else. This seems like a pretty balmy rare in Sealed.
It's incredibly good, yeah. I mean, obviously, 3-mana 3/3 Death Touch would already be a very strong card. The fact that, you can attack with it kind of with impunity, knowing at worst you're going to trade it off and then return something from your graveyard, makes it an incredibly powerful card at any stage in the game. One of the rares that you most want to, I think, open in this format.
Yeah, absolutely, and I it's good early, it's good late, and it's bigger than Raph's 2/2 Death Touch for 3. But Raph gets to play this game at least. He's got his colors of mana. It looks like he's got some options here. I think I saw Luminous Bonds floating around. So Izareth, there's not an immediate threat from it right now, given that Autumn has no creatures in their graveyard. So Raph can, bide his time for the moment at least before committing a card to deal with it.
And here we see Raph very clearly understanding his role assignment in this matchup, right? Attacking with the Daggerback Basilisk, threatening a theoretical 2 for 3 damage trade because he knows that he wants to get the game over with quickly. He's okay taking a slightly unfavorable damage race right now. He's got access to things like the 2 Mighty Leaps we saw in Game 1, things like Titanic Growth that can end the game out of nowhere, and he wants to get the game over before Autumn is able to deploy, their more powerful middle to late game.
Well, and here Raph responding with a rare of his own, Runic Armasaur. So kind of some odd stats here, a 2/5 for 3, but it's really the ability on it that's so good. Whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature or land that is not a mana ability, you draw a card. For instance, that Triad Greenseeker that Autumn just laid down.
Yeah, great timing for the Runic Armasaur. That's one of the cards that makes it so you don't actually even want to activate Triad Greenseeker. So
yeah, Triad Greenseeker at best draws you a card, but Raph's going to always draw a card every time you activate it. So gets aggressive again here with the Daggerback Basilisk, and Autumn just going to take it, fall down to 16.
One of the interesting things about Autumn's deck building here, they chose not to use either copy of Elvish Rejuvenator in their pool, which is a little surprising to me in a deck that includes Lich's Caress, the Epicure of Blood, Colossal Dreadmaw, Thornhide Wolves, and as we mentioned, is playing 4 colors and has ways to sacrifice creatures like Blood Divination. So Elvish Rejuvenator is a card that I've actually really enjoyed playing so far in the format. Surprised to see Autumn has a different take.
Right, and of course your point being that at 5 mana, if you play the Rejuvenator on turn 3, you hit a land off of it, you have another land in your hand, well, you get to jump the curve a little bit while also adding to your board and play a 5-drop on turn 3. As it is, what they do is add a Vine Mare, which is pretty good in itself here. Can't be blocked by black creatures, but it's a 5/3 hexproof, and we've already seen Vine Mare get suited up with Oaken Form or similar type effects a few times today and do quite a bit of work. But looks like we've got a little bit of board stall here because Raph Levy does have the 4/5 Wolves of his own. So both players with Death Touch creatures. Obviously, Raph a little happier to trade his off than Autumn would be, but we'll see where things go from here. So Raph still looks like he's holding on to that Luminous Bonds. Got another Wolf there in his hand. What do you think? We see both players kind of heading towards this board, so we've got a lot of toughness in play. What could a player do to really kind of break this open here?
Well, this is where a player like Raf Levy, I think, really loves to be, right? He jiu-jitsu player himself. Yeah. So, the first game was like a second knockout, right? This is more like they've been rolling for a little while, and he can kind of slowly start to apply pressure. Little small attacks, chipping away with the Basilisk, not really an attractive block here for Autumn, and try to figure out ways to eke out those sort of small advantages.
Wow, look at that. Raf gets the trades the Basilisk for the Vine Mare. That feels like a win for him, not only trading up on mana, but also getting the Hexproof creature off the board, and now Izareth, which Autumn might have planned on using that to bring back Vine Mare. Not going to do that thanks to that Luminous Bonds.
Yeah, and I actually think that's quite a nice block there by Autumn. Autumn actually has access to Gravedigger, Macabre Waltz, and then the Isarath the Wiccan that we saw on the battlefield. Right. So, it was unlikely that Vine Mare was going to get a great attack against Raf's decks anyway. So you can't just take 2 until the game's over.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Macabre Waltz you mentioned, I love that card. It's you return 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand for 2 mana, and then you discard a card. So in the late game, absolutely not a problem if you just discard a card that doesn't matter and get 2 of your best creatures back.
One thing that we talk about pretty frequently in sealed deck is a concept called flood mitigation, meaning that you're playing 16 to 18, usually around 17 lands in your deck. Obviously, you don't want to draw all 17 lands, but most people can't even use lands past about 6 or at most 7.
Right.
Cards like Macabre Waltz allow you to turn those extra cards, lands past, for example, 7, into relevant game-changing effects. So you want to make sure when you're building your sealed deck, you have at least a few of those cards that make it so that when you do draw 8, 9, 10 lands, they're not just wasted dead draws.
Yeah, and you talked about that block by Autumn that got the Death Toucher off the board, and we see that they were really able to pay that off for themselves, following up with a Colossal Dreadmaw that I bet Raf Levy would have liked to have traded for that Daggerback Basilisk.
Yeah, and Autumn actually used the Dried Green Seeker, which, again, allowed Raf to draw a card, but I think she really wants to just find some more action and actually thinks, my average card quality is so much higher than Raf's in the mid to late game. I'm okay with him being up half of a card, basically, and for this one turn in order to get through this critical phase of the game.
Well, and now they have the biggest creature on the board at 6/6 here with the Colossal Dreadmaw. So Raf with a lot of options, 15 toughness by my count on the board there to block and plenty of power. But, both players have access to green, and that means Titanic Growth is in play for both people if an attack step gets made.
Yeah, and I think that if you didn't know the deck list at all, you'd think much more likely that Raf would be the player with Titanic Growth than Autumn. Traditionally, 4-color decks don't want to play combat tricks, right? They're kind of ignoring that phase of the game in favor of things like removal spells in a more powerful late game. Raf certainly, the more likely player to have a combat trick at this point.
Well, this is just as good here. Let's just Caress, taking down the Runic Armasaur. So now this is big. It doesn't do much for this combat necessarily, but it does allow Autumn to activate that Dried Greenseeker with relative impunity.
Really good and advanced play, I think, by Autumn, right? You have a 2/5 and 2 4/5s, and you point your removal spell at the 2/5. What's up with that? I think that they've correctly identified that the Dried Greenseeker is going to provide an advantage that's just going to start to cascade as the game goes along, and the Colossal Dreadmaw is doing a nice job of holding off these Thornhide Wolves. So really nice play there, although this is going to be kind of a scary turn where obviously Thornhide Wolves combined with a combat trick could eat the Dreadmaw and then obviously put Raf on the front foot.
Yeah, and we talked about Raf with, that's pretty good. The Angel comes down. That means that those Wolves are 5/6s, but not really able to do anything with it. Just adds the 3/3 flyer to the board. He's that Colossal Dreadmaw enough to hold him off, and Autumn does hit a land off the Dryad Greenseeker. So you mentioned that cascading advantage, and every turn that goes by that Raf isn't able to progress ahead on board just means another turn that Dryad Greenseeker can really take over. So now the turn has been passed back to Autumn. What will they do facing down a 3/3 flyer now? Wow, that's pretty good. Rabid Bite. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another creature, and that allows the Colossal Dreadmaw to take out the Angel. And it also might give away, in conjunction with not attacking last turn, that Raf maybe not sitting on those combat tricks we saw in Game 1.
Yeah, and this is a degenerating situation for Raphael Levy, right? The longer this game goes, the better it gets for Autumn. And Autumn, just needs to make sure that they judiciously use their interaction, things like Rabid Bite and Lich's Caress, to deal with actual threats, right? The Colossal Dreadmaw is providing virtual card advantage right now by basically shutting down all of Raph's ground pound creatures.
Oh, and here's some actual card advantage right there. Blood Divination. Yeah, I'll sacrifice the creature that wasn't doing anything thanks to that Luminous Bonds, and I'll draw 3 cards for my trouble. Yeah, this situation got out of control pretty quickly here. Autumn just with all of the value.
Yeah, Autumn firing on all cylinders, 19 life, the biggest creature on the table, 4 spells in hand. I mean, this is the dream, and still the Dryad Greenseeker to continue to provide more value. And it's not necessarily always apparent what the Dryad Greenseeker is doing for you, since it can only ever get you a land.
Right.
But the important thing is that it's getting you deeper into your deck, and so that it's increasing the average quality of your draw steps.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen how strong the Explore mechanic is in Standard, and, Dryad Greenseeker is kind of one half of that. If there's a land on top of your deck, you draw it, and drawing a card's pretty good, and especially when it's a repeatable effect. So, all right, Raph finally able to turn something sideways here as the Drill Master arrives, gives the Thornhide Wolves +2/+0 in first strike, making it a 6/5 first striker, and Autumn looks to probably have taken the damage there. In step, activates the Greenseeker, doesn't hit anything, but you know what? That's an ability you don't mind missing on.
Yeah, and Autumn had a pretty interesting triple block if Autumn wanted to. Could have triple blocked and traded off the Colossal Dreadmaw for the Thornhide Wolves, basically, and prevented 6 damage. Kind of attractive when you're just so far ahead. There is still some very small chance that Raph had a combat trick in his hand that he's been kind of slow playing. Very unlikely, but possible. And Autumn just thinks, I'm too far ahead. I don't want to risk it, and I can take the 6 damage.
Yeah, the one thing they have to maybe worry about is that Raph with the Gallant Cavalry that arrived is kind of flooding the board. So in Autumn, as strong as a position that they are in, has a lot fewer creatures in play, and at 13 life, kind of have to worry about something that would allow all of Raph's team to get through or punch Truth for a bunch of damage.
Yeah, well, what I'd be worried about right now is Mighty Leap, right? Mm-hmm. Mighty Leap is the ground seems pretty well gummed up at this point, but potentially sending one of these Thornhide Wolves to the air represents potential 6 damage. You combine that with maybe other Pump or something like Inspired Charge to go wide, and it could deal big chunk damages to Autumn.
So Autumn just making full use of all of their mana on this turn, goes Daggerback Basilisk, Druid of the Cow, Skyscanner. None of those, by themselves are hugely impactful, but they certainly put plenty onto the battlefield, including a flyer. So,
yeah, Skyscanner, really an important draw. Just having access to that potential chump blocker there. Mm-hmm. And we see Eldritch Rejuvenator for Raph, not the right phase of the game for that at all. For him. And the first 2 cards that he looked at were Mighty Leap and Titanic Growth. 2 cards that would have been so valuable to him about 4 turns ago.
Yeah.
But as we mentioned, the advantage is just starting to kind of building on itself for Autumn, and they're really starting to pull away.
I think I caught a glimpse of maybe a Gravedigger in there. We talked about it being in their deck. Plus another Hizareth is in the deck as well.
Yikes.
So. All right, well, here you go. Greenseeker drawing another land. How will Autumn play it with everything in their favor, but at 13 life, facing down a pretty big board from Raph Levy? If you have to worry about maybe an Inspired Charge or something like that off the top, how do you think Autumn will play it from this point on, given how many options they have?
Well, the interesting thing is that Autumn doesn't have that many ways to evade, right? To win in these sorts of board stalls. So they're going to want to wait for either the copy of Chromium the Mutable or maybe that Skymark's Bloodletter.
Right. Or just turn a Colossal Dreadmaw sideways and put the onus onto Raph to answer it. So we'll see what he wants to do, but this is a big attack step, and Autumn with a lot of cards in hand and all the mana they could possibly want. Interesting
kind of attack here, right? There are some very attractive, double or triple blocks here for Raph. So I would expect him. Yeah, this triple looks kind of intuitive, right? This is a triple that on its face trades the Thornhide Wolves for Colossal Dreadmaw, and even if Autumn were to have a removal spell, still does the same. If Autumn were to have a Titanic Growth, you just get a 2-for-2 basically. Autumn would need to have 2 cards for this block to look badly. And at this point, if Autumn has 2 really powerful cards, Raph was never winning this game anyway.
Right. So, and that's one of the things, Raph there isn't just playing against the card on the table, playing against the card that Autumn might have in their hand. And so he said, intuitive to at least to a Hall of Famer to make that triple block and have it all under control. So Colossal Dreadmaw hits the graveyard along with the Thornhide Wolves, but now Autumn counting up their mana.
Oh, it's never a good feeling. when you're already behind on board, your opponent has 9 lands out, and there's some possibility they won't have enough mana for what they want to do this turn. That's a pretty heartbreaking feeling.
All right, so how do we start things off? Yeah, we talked about it earlier, Macabre Watts, and that, oh man, that makes that attack make a lot of sense right there. Discard a land, return a Colossal Dreadmaw and an Isarith to their hand. Autumn just completely rolling here, and thanks to that Druid of the Cal does have enough mana to play them both. All right, so Raph off the top.
What Raph really wants to find is Pegasus Courser here. That's really the ideal card for this situation.
Yeah, the Bugler, of course, lets you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put a creature with power 2 or less into your hand, gets the Dryad Greenseeker. Not a bad one, but yeah, you're just about 10 turns behind Autumn's.
Yep. And Raph had the kind of the body language and demeanor of someone who's getting ready to scoop up his cards if he drew a land that turn. But Bugler finding Dry Greenseeker, potentially his own advantage engine, he certainly has at least enough going on that he's going to play it out a couple more turns.
Yeah, little does he know that Autumn has ways to bring back creatures basically forever. All right, how will they want to play this? I think we might see some creatures turn sideways here again. I mean, the number of times that Autumn can just loop this Dreadmaw if they want is pretty good, and will quickly chew through Raph's board here.
Yep, and I think that, if you're Autumn, we talked about this earlier in terms of lining up blocks. You need to assume at some point Raphael Levy is going to draw a copy of Inspired Charge, right? And when all of a sudden Raphael draws his card and attacks with everything, you need to not be surprised that happens.
Looks like Isareth comes in as well, paying 4 mana to return the Vine Mare to play. Of course, with that corpse counter on it, so if it would leave the battlefield, it will be exiled. But if it leaves the battlefield, it's taking something with it here with Hexproof 5/3. All right, so Raph puts a Rejuvenator and a token on the Isareth. I mean, it's pretty much as good as you can ask for if you're Raph Levy, I think. And as well, the Colossal Dreadmaw gets blocked, takes out a Thornhide Wolves. So the battlefield's starting to clear a little bit here after that combat. Throughout all of this, Raph is still at 20 life, but this is not a game where the life total is the most relevant thing happening.
Oh my God.
Gravedigger, returning Isareth. Wow. That is, I think we might see this Colossal Dreadmaw for, the 3rd or 4th time next turn.
Yeah, pretty gross.
That's pretty sick. Oh, wow. So Autumn just showing the power of the black-green deck, the ability to recur things over and over again, all along getting value off of the Dryad Greenseeker. Raph draws for the turn, thinks it through. Well, there's a Pegasus Courser.
And you notice that Raph, for the very first time that we've ever seen, strongly considered activating the Greenseeker on upkeep, right? Realized that he needed to draw a spell that turn. Elected not to do it and drew the Courser anyway, but at least considered that kind of play we've been talking about.
Yeah, decided he might have needed the blocker in this case, with Autumn just, going off the screen with all of these creatures they have, so... All right, so...
How much fun is Autumn's deck?
Well, it is pretty fun, that's for sure. Just imagine the loop. 2 Isareths returning each other over and over again, abyssing your opponent, taking a creature off their board every turn. All right, here comes the attack. How much will they decide to send? Isareth turns sideways, Vine Mare, Thornhide Wolves, along with the death-touching Basilisk here. Raph, time might be running out on the chance to find something. And all right, here comes an Ithras activation for 6 mana. Colossal Dreadmaw has returned.
I really like that Autumn has decided to turn the corner so quickly here. A lot of people, when they get these sort of advantaged board states, wait a little too long to attack and allow their opponent to draw into things like Inspired Charge and that sort of thing. So Autumn, has pressed the advantage from their early game success and is trying to put the screws to Raph before anything bad can happen.
Well, yeah, and as far as they know, I mean, Raph could be drawing to, Cleansing Nova, a board wipe or something like that would completely invalidate all of this advantage that they've managed to build up and kind of reset the game with Raph at a higher life total. But so, yeah, you're right, absolutely. Turning the screws to him, making him make these decisions, at the very least cleaning off some of the creatures from his board to make any future Inspired Charge type effects a lot worse. And now Raph is running out of creatures to block with very quickly.
Yeah, and realistically, we know that Raph doesn't have access to something like Cleansing Nova, but what you're saying absolutely makes sense. And now it's, Raph's board sort of decimated by those blocks.
Yeah, absolutely. So there we go. Raph all of a sudden down to 2 creatures, draws his card for the turn. Looked like it wasn't a Lance. Didn't. All right, so yeah, now Autumn brings the rest of their board into play. By the way, there's still a Colossal Dreadmaw over there. And Raph just passes the turn back. About the 13th Dryad Greenseeker activation of the game for Autumn there. Yeah. All right, so I think it's by all accounts seems to just be a matter of time. At least we know that Raph doesn't have anything to draw him out of this in an easy way, right? There's no one card that's going to get him back in the game, and Autumn just thinking about how they best want to close this out, counting up the damage. Colossal Dreadmaw and Vinemare both came back thanks to Izareth. All right, 2 mana. Looks like a Rabid Bite here. That'll clean it up. Raph looks at his hand. Nope. All right. None of these cards counter that spell. Okay. By the way, of course, Rabid Bite. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature your opponent controls, and you target your own Vinemare, and your opponent can't do too much about it. So takes down the Dryad Greenseeker, which looks at the top card. It is not a land, so Raph at least is drawing some action next turn, but that's if he has a next turn.
Yeah.
Everything turning sideways here from Autumn. Will they even send the Dryad Greenseeker in? Thinking about it, doing it. Well, it did everything else this game. Why not attack with it too?
Looks like Raph did just draw Inspired Charge about 5 turns too late. Unfortunately, Raph got to play this game, but just didn't draw his cards in the correct order.
Yeah, did not curve out the way he might have wanted. So, thinking it through though, not just scooping them up quite yet. Doing some math, and I warn you, man, the math isn't good, and there you go. The hand extended. Autumn Burchett taking down the Hall of Famer in Raph Levy. That's your English national champion winning that one. All right, there we go. That was an excellent time match here in round 4. So welcome back to the booth, everybody. I'm Corbin Hassler. I'm joined by Paul Rietzel. We just watched a couple matches here in round 4 of GP Minneapolis. What was your takeaway from those games we watched?
Well, I just think that Autumn's deck looks so fun. I mean, I think it's so cool. I think that the green-black decks, as we mentioned, has struggled to kind of find an identity early on in Core Set 2019 Limited. But Autumn really showed us how to do it, right? Good kind of grindy elements, the ways to reuse cards from the graveyard, enough early defense to kind of get to that point, and then just an absolutely brutal late game that was too much for Raphael Levy to handle.
Right. We talked about it being a bunch of colors, but you know what? It worked out in those games and worked out pretty well. So, all right, I believe we have some more time walk for you. Back down to the table. Sam Party on your left, Makis Matsoukas on your right. Looks like 3 colors for Makis here as well. Red, white, blue against blue-green for Sam, and that's an Anticipate at the end step there for Matsoukas. So look at the top 3 cards of his library.
Yeah, and Makis has basically an archetype that we haven't seen a lot of, the blue-red spells type of strategy, just splashing a little, just touching white for 2 copies of Luminous Bonds off of a Meandering River and a Stone Quarry. So Makis has a pretty nice-looking deck, multiple copies of Lightning Strike, and obviously the Enigma Drake, which is the corner post uncommon for blue-red. And then Sam Party looks like has a little more of an ambitious mana base, a blue-green base with a pretty heavy white splash for Aerial Engineer, Arcades the Strategist, and his own 2 copies of Luminous Bonds. So pretty heavy band.
Yeah, one of the things we talked about before the round started was now that we're into the pro show, we're round 4, the pros are coming off their buys. They're going to sort of evaluate it differently and see more of these sort of ambitious play the best cards, and you see 3 colors there for Sam Pardee with that Rejuvenator helping it along. So Makis with 3 colors of his own, though. That Boggart Brute, of course, being a 3/2 menace creature. Sam Ramped is going to have access to 5 mana this turn, but is down to 17 after the Boggart Brute gets in. Followed up by a wall for Matsoukas. Well, I guess if you're trying to play a lot of spells, the wall makes sense.
Yeah, and certainly Makis has access to flying creatures in the form of Aven Wind Mage, the really powerful Djinn of Wishes. And also a copy of a card we talked about before the show, Patient Rebuilding, one of the strongest rares in the format. So, when you have those types of cards to win the game without attacking on the ground, occasionally including Wall of Mist is not a bad idea.
Yeah, and of course, Lightning Strike there for Matsukas, taking down Party's Snapping Drake. So, Party now with access to at least 5 mana, had a tap land last turn, so we'll see if that unlocks anything in his hand. Matsukas' mana base over there looks pretty good with 2 tap lands providing multiple colors and going to give him the ability to play all those powerful cards you just mentioned now.
Yeah, it's usually pretty tough for a blue-red deck to splash. I mean, you have card drawing, but you don't have access to the traditional green mana fixing elements, so you usually need to have to play to things like Manalith in order to splash a color. Makis' pool, blessed him with both the Mana Eating River and the Stone
Right.
Quarry, so able to splash the 2 Luminous Bonds without really junking up his mana too much.
Yeah, Sam going wide a little bit. Don't know if Druid of the Cow will be too helpful for him here after having so much mana already, but does get the 1/3 down into play. It helps, of course, blocking the menacing Bargart Brook along with the Pioneer putting 2 bodies. Yeah. There you go. That's a pretty good blue creature right there. Exclusion Mage. Bounce that token, it's gone forever.
Yeah, where's Marshall Sutcliffe when you need him?
Yeah, Mana War Reborn. Oh, here is an Angel, though, for Sam Party. That gives the entire team +1/+1 Vigilance. We've seen that card be very good so far today.
Corbin, looks like the players are playing a lot faster to me.
Yeah. I think we might be sped up a little bit here on this time walk. If everyone played this fast, then that would be great, right?
Well, we saw a few times in Sacramento last week in a completely normal speed match. The players were playing so fast that we couldn't analyze it.
Yeah.
Which was great, but there's a level of that. That's
you just have to go Rich Hagon style on it. You just have to analyze at the same speed they're playing. That's all. All right, so we see Divination there for Sam Party, drawing a couple cards, passing the turn back. That Angel got in a bit of a hit. Oh, there's that Djinn of Wishes you pointed out. That's a pretty powerful one right there. So the Djinn is a 5 mana card. Stick with me here. It's a 5 mana 4/4 flyer, so it's already pretty good. It enters the battlefield with 3 wish counters on it. 4 mana, remove a wish counter. Reveal the top card of your library. You may play without paying its mana cost if you don't exile it.
When I first read this card, I thought, I don't really understand. This is basically just air elemental with a very small upside. Then I read, without paying its mana cost. What the heck?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's omniscience on a creature.
It is an absolute comical bomb, and getting to untap with it is one of the most fun things you can do.
Yeah, Makis has done that. Sam Party adds a Colossal Dreadmaw to the board. So he's got a lot of creatures in play, including a 6/6 Trampler, but oh man, Makis has the ability to do quite a bit this turn, a lot of options.
One of the cool things about Djinn of Wishes is it lets you play a land off of it as well, right? So you can play that card. It's not cast that card. So Makis can use the Djinn of Wishes. If he finds a land, still have access to Luminous Bonds this turn.
You called it. That was perfect, too. That island comes off the top. He's got Luminous Bonds in hand. Just going to start things off with that 4/4 attack in the air, and there's the Luminous Bonds on the Colossal Dreadmaw. Well, that was, that Djinn of Wishes. You called it a comical bomb, but that's not very funny from Sam Party's side. Makis having a great time here. Arcane Encyclopedia. Sam Party going to immediately turn that thing sideways to draw.
Yeah, and not quite the card advantage engine that Djinn of Wishes is in the short term, but if the game goes very long, it's a tough card to beat. So Sam's still kind of lacking an answer to the 4/4 flyer at this time.
Cracks back with his own Angel. He's got the ground under control. That Exclusion Mage and this Bargart Brute aren't doing too much, but and it kind of gives it away. If you had an answer to the Djinn, you would have played it immediately so that Makis couldn't activate its ability. Spark Tongue Dragon, though. Oh, cancel is huge there from Sam Party. Spark Tongue Dragon, of course, could have played it, could have paid 3, shot down something. Cancel stops that, but Luminous Bonds lands on the Angel instead. Yeah, if you're Sam Party and Makis doesn't even need to activate the Djinn of Wishes, that's not a great place to be.
Yeah, critical to have that cancel there, obviously, is that Spark Tongue Dragon would have dealt with Sam's only flyer and added another flyer to the board. So
yeah, we're playing real fast here now as Rock's Oracle lands for Sam Party to draw a card. Makis gets a land off of the Djinn of Wishes, turns it sideways again. Sam Party down to 2. It's time to find an answer.
Yeah.
Did he do it? Well, didn't just immediately pick him up. Draws another card off the Arcane Encyclopedia. These players are getting very fast shuffling. Brian Kibler's got nothing on Sam Party right now. Oh, look at that. Illuminous Bonds actually will answer the Djinn for the moment. I mean, it stops it from attacking, and there goes the last wish counter.
Oh, my gosh.
Conveniently into another creature that is exactly lethal. That was pretty good. All right, well, there you go, everybody. That is the match. Makis will go on to take that one into. Welcome back to the booth. I'm Corbin Hassler. I'm joined by Paul Rietzel. That was a fun round. We saw some pretty good cards. What stood out to you in those games we watched as sort of, the cards that really made a difference?
Yeah, so to me, one of the things that's critical and limited, if you don't have one of those synergistic archetypes, kind of like tight decks, are ways to gain repetitive advantages. So that can be a card drawing effect like Dryad Green Seeker or Djinn of Wishes, or it could just be untapping multiple times with the biggest creature on the table and threatening your opponent into making bad blocks. So we saw the Dryad Green Seeker from Autumn Burchett. We saw the Djinn of Wishes from Makis Matsoukas, both of which spearheaded them to 4-0 records.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a great round of Magic here in round 4 of GP Minneapolis. So we are going to take some commercials. We will be back with more Magic in round 5 here at GP Minneapolis after this. Thank you for watching.